What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Hopefully you had a good weekend. We had a lot of fun. We, of course, did the Spawn cast, so if you missed that, you can go back and check it out on the channel. And then I also did a teardown tech wave of a GameStop refurbished Xbox One and had a lot of fun with that and kind of talking about the launch of that system, specifically because, of course, we are just heard about the Series X, and we're going to be going into the launch of the next generation PlayStation and Xbox next year, so it's interesting to look back on the last time we had systems like these launching from these companies. Today, though, we have a bunch of stuff to go over because the Pokemon Company is, they are moving forward to find those leakers. They are not messing around. We're going to talk a bit about that today. We also had the NPD numbers, the results for November in the US, and we'll talk a bit about the sales charts and where Pokemon and Star Wars and a few other games placed. And then Resident Evil 2, that demo we talked about previously, turns out there is a very interesting cameo and Easter egg in there that you'll probably want to go back and find out for yourself. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that like button. It does help out, and get subscribed so you can stay up to date on all the gaming news going on in the gaming world. And we're going to start today with Forza. Now, Forza, of course, is something we're used to seeing almost every year. We didn't see it this past year at all, a new one. We have Forza Horizon 4 that's kind of held us over, but next year we do expect one to be revealed to us, obviously to launch alongside the Series X and, hey, maybe a Series S. But they actually talked a bit about this. Turn 10 and the companies behind Forza talked on a Mixer stream, specifically that the new Forza, which we assume is going to be Forza Motorsport 8, is playable. They're already playing it and testing it, and they are expecting an announcement next year at some point. I assume that's E3 because if they're launching the Series X like they've said during the holidays and everything goes according to plan, they have to have a big blowout at E3 for next generation games. We've seen Hellblade 2, and that, according to them, it seems anyway, is going to be a Series X or just a next generation, a Scarlet exclusive game. So maybe Forza ends up being one that's between generations because it's like a car game, and those tend to look pretty good even now. So maybe they can fit it there. But yeah, shocking, right? A new Forza game coming next year. Maybe that's why they had no problem just outright talking about it. Also, for anyone who was curious about why there was no Smash Bros. Announcement, there was a lot of people pushing towards Geoff Keighley and the award show, like, why didn't you have a Smash reveal there? And that, of course, is a question that I would more or less have for Nintendo, but Geoff did reply to a person on Twitter saying, "That's not really a question I can answer. I don't make the games or set up the schedule of announcements. Just because something happened last year doesn't mean it's happening this year. It would have been cool for sure." So the thing to really take away from all of this is that it was Nintendo's call, obviously, to have something at the Game Awards. Now, maybe Geoff pushed a bit harder last year to have something like the big Joker reveal, which was big, but maybe it just doesn't fit anyway, this year anyway, into Nintendo's plans for announcements or anything they wanted to do, specifically around Smash, considering I believe The Last Fighter should at least be out by February 2020, so we're only a couple months away from that, and that would mean that they would reveal it, well, at the Game Awards, between the Game Awards and I guess sometime in January when we expect that early year direct. So maybe that's what we should look towards now. But yeah, all of the Game Awards stuff, those announcements, those are, of course, dependent on the company that's making the game and then has something to even show. Also, we talked a little bit about Easter eggs with Resident Evil earlier at the beginning of the show, but there was one really neat one found, and of course we were talking about this Tony Hawk rumor that was getting thrown around, like the old pro skaters getting like some sort of revised release or some kind of remake or remaster. Well, someone actually found the Neversoft logo in the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare on just a character's body in the game. You can see an image here, and that is indeed a Neversoft logo that is tattooed to their arm. And this was found by a Reddit user, and they posted that the Neversoft Easter egg found on an out-of-place looking body in the Piccadilly Circus mission is found, and you can just go back and see it for yourself as well. And it's interesting to see that. People were wondering why the Neversoft logo is there in the first place. Well, Neversoft, I believe the studio is still technically active, although the people moved over and they work on Call of Duty now. So maybe a person who's been there so long that they remember, obviously, the days of just Neversoft actually having a logo in the game. Maybe they said, hey, you know what, I'm working on some modeling here. I'm going to throw this in just for fun. And it was approved by Activision. I mean, they own the rights to it, so why not? It'd be fun. And it probably didn't take them too long to drop that on the person's arm in the game. But I do like those Easter eggs. It was kind of neat to see. And hey, maybe we do have something someday from Neversoft so they can actually put their logo back on. Or maybe they'll just make another Call of Duty. And guys, some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with the Pokemon Company and the leakers behind the Sword and Shield evolutions and different things from that strategy guide getting out. If you remember, leading up to the release and I guess reveal at that point of certain evolutions in the game, there were all these leaks going around, and it was strange. It was all seemingly happening around a strategy guide that somehow was obtained by a person. It doesn't seem to have been by legitimate means, so at least is what it appears anyway. And we got to a point where Nintendo and the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, they were going around and they were just like striking down different channels that had shown these leaks at some point. They were even going after websites to take them down. And remember, they put out a statement saying that they were going to track down the leakers on places like Discord and 4chan, and they said that it actually damages their brand. And I don't know, it's hard to say that when you sell so many copies, right? You know, millions and millions of copies in a short amount of time, but the Pokemon Company doesn't mess around. Pokemon is the largest entertainment asset in the world. It's crazy how much money Pokemon in general makes. So they don't mess around when stuff comes out that could affect their bottom line. So they have now moved a bit further, as we saw court documents appear online, that they now have permission from the courts to start sending subpoenas to places like Discord and even 4chan. Basically, they're looking to bring people into the courts. Either way, I don't know if they got to bring Discord in and somehow or bring 4chan in and ask them or get to the bottom of who put these images online. Basically, you have a username, obviously, that you're posting under, but they want to know who's behind that username, whether it's, I guess, through IP addresses or just locating people. Yeah, they're not messing around here. And when they do find those people, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I assume they're going to sue for a ton of money. Like we've seen Nintendo go after ROM sites, and remember, it was like millions of dollars, and it turned out it was like a couple in Arizona or something, to the point where, well, what do you do? You're not going to pay $12 million, right? So they always have to try to work all of that out. And a lot of time it's for show. And that's what I think this is. They want to say, hey, look, if you're leaking our stuff, we're going to find you. That's it. They want this to stay here and say, look, you can look back on this if you decide to leak something. Just know the Pokemon Company, they're to the point now where they're going to start pulling 4chan into this whole thing to try to find these people that put this stuff out there. Discord, of course, is a bit more like mainstream, I guess we'd say. So they have no problem, I guess, pulling them in. But to get to the point where you're like, all right, where's 4chan? Yeah, we're bringing 4chan in. That's how you know they want to make an example out of this whole situation. So we'll see if it goes any further than this. I assume it will, because they're going to start sending out subpoenas to different places and bringing them in front of the courts. And we'll find out if we eventually see them actually bring, I guess, a suit against a person that has leaked it from a strategy guide. All that started from just taking pictures of a strategy guide. Next up, let's talk about that Xbox Series X for a minute, specifically its form factor and its size. Now, of course, we saw it and it actually looked pretty big in that trailer, right? A lot of us looked at it and said, wow, that thing looks like the size of a mid-sized PC tower. Look pretty big. But a couple of places now have determined its dimensions, and they've taken that and put it into different programs to actually create a 3D model, and then started comparing it. And then IGN actually did a 3D printing of the system, which is kind of neat. I mean, it's a cool idea to actually have something in front of you and then walk around the office and like, okay, here's a PlayStation 4, let me put it next to that, and here's an Xbox One. Well, they put out an image that kind of shows it next to everything, and you know what? When you start looking at it this way and you kind of walk into the room and take one of your systems and stand it up, it's not that bad, actually. I thought it was, like myself even thought it was much larger, but then they, of course, put the controller next to it, and I thought, okay, it's like 3 controllers high, that's not bad. It's a thick system, right? We've talked about that. It's a very thick system. The original Xbox, though, if you have one of those laying around, turn that thing vertical, and you know what? That is actually a bit closer than you would think. Even the Xbox One X is taller. In fact, everything's taller than this thing when you put it on its side. But, of course, it is still a large piece that you would try to fit into your entertainment center. I like the idea of people getting to the point now where I saw someone on Reddit actually take like cardboard and measure everything out and then make a box. I mean, that's what it is. It's a rectangle. But I'm more curious myself, not as many people, but actually opening up and seeing how they are utilizing that very large space. It is, while it doesn't look from the side here that much bigger than an Xbox One X when it stood up, technically it's just wider, it does have twice the volume. So they have plenty of room in there, and we assume all of this is designed just around power. Next up, let's talk about the NPD sales charts. These, of course, are the sales charts that track month to month in the United States, all done by dollar sales, and then they also have unit sales, but for the most part, from what we're seeing for consoles anyway, it's pretty much a landslide for the Switch. It's not surprising. The other systems, of course, are in like the later years of their life cycle, so they have fallen off to the point now where we're still down quite a bit, about 29% year over year from last year. However, the Switch continues strong. In fact, it's still the best-selling system of this entire year, 2019, and it should finish that way through December. Not a surprise there. Like I said, it's doing very, very well, but we did have I think some interesting placings here in the top 20. I'll show you guys the top 10, which is what we'll go over for software, as you're seeing here. Call of Duty Modern Warfare still is number one. Remember, that released in October, but it's still number one for November. It's a very strong seller. It's Call of Duty, and it does very, very well in the United States. Then we have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which we will come back to because that's a big deal at number two. Then we had Pokemon Sword, and then we had Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield Double Pack, and then we had Pokemon Shield. So 3, 4, and 5 were all for what I'm just going to say is basically one game, but still, that's kind of funny. Then we have Madden NFL 20 at 6, Death Stranding debuting at 7, NBA 2K20 at 8. Then we have Need for Speed Heat, which is awesome to see at 9. And then Luigi's Mansion 3 at 10. Also, a quick little note to throw in there. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is now the best-selling fighting game in US history, with a lifetime dollar sales total surpassing that of the previous best-selling fighting game, and that, of course, was Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, any of those Nintendo games that we just talked about in the top 10 don't have any of their digital sales counted. I believe Call of Duty still doesn't have, like, its PC Battle.net launcher sales added in either. But to see Jedi Fallen Order at number 2, that's pretty good. That is a single-player game from EA, and while EA games tend to do pretty well generally in the sales charts, that is not a multiplayer game from them. In fact, it has no multiplayer, it has no online interaction at all. So to see that do so well, and you know what? I think it's going to stay in the top, I'm going to say top 5 going through December, because the new Star Wars movie is out and it's Christmas and the new Star Wars movie is out. So you're going to get a lot of merchandise, and this will kind of just sit next to it and probably sell quite a bit more going forward, especially if there are any sales throughout, like winter sales at stores or even on the digital shops or anything. So yeah, I think that was a success for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I hope we do get a sequel. Respawn wants to make one, and EA has to come to the table, I think, next year and say it was a success. I don't need to see them play off a single-player release just because it didn't sell, 15 million copies or something. I think they're locked in about 6 million, and that would be a success to them. And I think Fallen Order is going to get there. So I don't want to hear anything from EA about this not being successful. Now, for Pokemon, if you did add up everything they said, if it was all one SKU, and I mean, it could be, right? Like, you could do Pokemon, it's just one game. It would that actually take over the second spot. The fact that they had to divide it into 3 separate SKUs and listings is what actually kind of broke them down to 3, 4, and 5. So Pokemon also did very, very well, but again, it's Call of Duty, and that's going to happen. I did like seeing Need for Speed Heat in the top 10. I think that was great. It's not going to it might actually. I think sales expectations for that was about 2 to 3 million. It might get there. That's another one with no microtransactions. So hey, if you want a good Need for Speed game, there you go. Go grab that one. Luigi's Mansion rounding out the top 10. Also, I think is very, very good to see. I mean, that technically came out right at the end of October, obviously, so it had like the entire November scope to sell, but still, good to see that there, not counting digital sales. Overall, I think it was a pretty good month, and then, of course, next year, when we get into November, I think next year's November is going to crush this one, because we'll have 2 new systems out, maybe more depending on what Microsoft comes to the table with, and I'm sure Nintendo will have a couple of surprises, we'll say, going into the holidays next year. It's going to be really fun, I think, for 2020. And with our last bit of news, let's talk about Resident Evil 2. We talked about a demo that had released, I believe the RPD demo, and it looked like they had just removed the time limit, which was cool, because then people can go back and check it out without having to feel rushed or have just a limited amount of time to play it. But they actually added something else, and this is interesting. People actually started to notice this as they went back in to check it out. If you go to a certain point in the level, at the beginning of the police station, you go outside, you'll hear an interesting phrase being yelled outside. Yeah, that's right. It looks like Nemesis is in Resident Evil 2's demo, kind of. We have, of course, the voice clip of Nemesis yelling stars, right? And that is a neat idea. See, Capcom is actually doing a really cool thing here because, of course, that technically intersects, the storylines kind of intersect with Resident Evil 2 and 3 somewhat, right? So to have Nemesis kind of having a little bit of a cameo is a cool idea for marketing, and I think it would be neat if they do a bit more with Resident Evil 2, the full game, as we saw that achievement get added in that mentions Jill. If they do some more work there to kind of start to merge those two games together to a degree leading up to its release to get people excited, I don't think they're just going to drop Nemesis into Resident Evil 2, but they could do some fun stuff like you heard that little cameo, the voice of stars, and who knows, maybe they do something with Jill, but I like what Capcom's doing right now, building up to the release of Resident Evil 3. But yeah, go check out the demo if you want to see it for yourself. It's right outside of the police station. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This one is from Gilbeezy saying, I love how the Series X has what looks like the green alien blob from the original Xbox dashboard inside. I wonder if that will actually be some kind of RGB light. And I had brought this up. It would be neat if it could change any color you want and you can change it in the dashboard. I think the green is obvious, right? It's for brand, and that makes sense. But I mean, they could do that just in the marketing, and then when you actually get the system, you can play around with the light and colors. That would be a fun touch. I mean, yeah, I mean, RGB lights and regular lights, just green. I think they could make it work if they wanted to. It's just gonna come down if they do, or maybe they have other systems that come out that have different color lights inside as well. Like we think there's another one, the Xbox Series S, for example. And who knows, maybe that form factor is even different. Maybe because it doesn't need a disk drive and it's technically less powerful. Maybe it doesn't need all that ventilation and the way they're cooling it. Maybe it's like a square. That'd be a cool idea, but I do like that green light, and I hope there's a way to customize it through software because they decided to include an RGB light. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go do it here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys. Hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike, and leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's the Pokemon Company. They're not messing around with these leakers. What do you think about that, though? Do you think they should crack down on this whole situation just to make an example right now, or do you think they should just kind of move on and say, you know what, we'll work to tighten things up a bit better next time? Also, what do you think about the Resident Evil 2 Nemesis cameo? Should Capcom continue on like this and add more stuff as we go along? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.